won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. He's working all things out. Come on, stand your feet now with me, would you? I can say it now. Let's all sing together. Yes, I will. Oh, yes, I will. Lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will. Bless your name. Yes, I will. Sing for joy when my heart is heavy. All my days. Oh, yes, I will.
Might as well go out on top, right?
On everybody. I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. He won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh, yes, I will. I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against. And I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against. And yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Oh, yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh, yes, I will. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will live for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh, yes, I will all my days. Oh, yes, I will. Awesome. Thank you so much, and please be seated.
Okay, kids.
Kids, it's your time to go.
Get on. Bye. Bye. Listen, listen. Y'all have fun. They go.
Okay, so I did make that for a bigger church. That took them a lot longer to get out than it did that when I learned something today. I'll do that again and make it shorter for us. It is time for us to take a moment and go to the Lord in prayer today. Our president has asked us to have a National Day of Prayer, and I think it's important that we do that, but I wanted to kind of whisper in his ear, we do that anyway on Sundays, but we'll definitely do that today. And the song that we just sang, please don't miss that one. Yes, I will lift your name in the lowest valley. You know, the Bible talks about very clearly some paradoxes in Scripture. Things that are said that seem one way, but when you turn around the other way, they really mean something entirely different. Like the Bible says, if we give, it'll be given back to us. Good measure, pressed down, shaking together, will men give to our bosom. That's a paradox. Why would we give to get? Well, the truth of the matter is we give money and things and our time, but we don't give to get. But God gives us back things other than money, right? He gives us back amazing things. I've been in places in my life, and you'll hear about them today. Been in places in my life where I could walk up and hand people money because God had blessed me financially, and I could help them in their journey. I've also been to places in my life where people walked up and handed me money because I was struggling so much. And one time in particular, when Matt was sick, a gentleman in our church walked up and gave me 6 $100 bills on a Sunday morning. Didn't know what God was doing, but I know on Monday, the doctor sent us down to the pharmacy at the hospital, and the copay on Matt's medicine was $400. I figured I got a windfall. I had a couple hundred extra. But let me tell you something. It's more blessed to give than receive. Amen. It's easier to give than receive. It's hard to receive. Now you find somebody that it's not hard for them to receive, don't give them anything. Okay? Fair enough? Because if it's easy for them to get, they're probably pros at it. Because it's hard to receive. So today, one of those other paradoxes we've got to focus on, and we did with the song, and we'll do in the next few moments as we continue on, is this. In the times in your life when you feel the least like worship is when worship is the most important. Amen. Think about that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And in so many friends and family today, I know Spencer and Heather come to us from another church, and that's where Joe Jr. that you met a couple weeks ago, that's where he goes to church in Sulphur Springs. They had a staff pastor this week lose a 16-year-old boy to a terrible accident. Rocks just racking their church. But in those times when we feel the least like worship is when it's important the most that we do worship. I'm telling you. And Lynette, share with us too about what's the other loss that y'all have had here in Lone Oak this week.
Jordan Reeves, who's a Lone Oak Middle School student in the 7th grade, he lost his battle with leukemia this week. So we need to pray for him and his parents, Donna and Keith Reeves, the rest of his family, and the 7th grade class. It's hard for children to understand when they lose someone their own age.
Sure is. So that's what we gathered together today. So we have a lot of folks to remember in prayer, a lot of things going on in our nation. We certainly need to remember all of those folks. I don't mean to throw a curveball at you, but Marshall, would you mind standing and voicing our prayer this morning for all the needs that we have in our lives?
Dear God, we are so thankful for this day, God, and the opportunity to come here and worship. There are so many sad events going on right now, God. People who have lost their lives, and so many family members and friends whose lives are touched in some kind of big, impactful way because of those losses, God. We love you. Help us to just find a reason to be grateful, to praise you even in the lowest valleys, God. We want to praise you and just offer all of our thanks and praise every day. God, be with all the families that are just going to be sad for weeks and months because of the tragic events that have happened, God. But just help us know that there is always something to be encouraged by. God, you're a God that loves us. Even when we don't feel like we deserve it, you love us unconditionally, and we just want to be so grateful and let our gratitude show up in our day-to-day lives, God. We love you. We're thankful for God who provides and loves us every day. In your name we pray. Amen.
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 feel more comfortable. And fills the time while I walk down here. I'm honored to have the opportunity now to be in the services today in Pastor Dewey's absence. Some of you in this church have heard this story before. Some of you have heard this in other places, but for many of you, I think this may be the first time. How many, for the first time, you've actually heard me do Matt's story? Okay, that's quite a few. That's quite a few. So I'm honored to have this opportunity to do this today. This is the screen that I put up that shows my books, and then I ask people to go back and make a donation. We're going to skip that one today, if that's okay. What I do have is a few copies of my brand new book, but those of you that know how we do things, this church, Prairie Valley, has supported our ministry for years now. When there was just a handful of folks, and that always meant so much to us that you were willing to make such a sacrifice. So for people that are members of this church and attend this church, your money doesn't work at our table. We just don't ever charge. And we don't really ever sell books anyway. It's always just a donation model. So I do have some of my brand new book, which is this one, which is Tears in a Bottle, but it's second edition, totally unlike anything. And today's the day we were going to go public with it. And I was going to make a big deal of it, but it just didn't seem like the right thing to do. Is that okay with everybody while everything else is going on? But I do have some copies of it. If you want them, it's not hard to make a donation to our ministry. It's very easy. You know how to do that, but we're not going to do that today. If you want to make a donation for our ministry in lieu of that, you can. But don't worry about it, especially if you're a member of this church. Does that sound fair? But you're going to have to come and ask me for a book because we're not going to put them out and do a book display and all that stuff. But this is what we do. And I tell the story of Matt that did so profoundly change our lives. I spent my entire life in the ministry. I took my first job as a pianist in a church when I was 11. My first job as a music director when I was 15. And I've never done anything else. It's always been that in my life. And that's not a complaint. I've loved it. Didn't always love it. My parents drugged me to church. I tell people I had a drug problem just like a lot of you did. My parents drugged me to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And that's supposed to be funny too. Obviously it wasn't. Maybe you're right, honey. Maybe I don't have a good sense of humor.
I thought it was funny.
Did you really?
I did.
Did you? Okay, well thank you. That helps me some. Not much, but some. And so there were times that I didn't want to go to church, especially in my junior high, which was what we called middle school back then, years. But I look back today, one of the first things I'll do when I get to heaven is tell my mom and dad thanks again for the way they raised me, because they saved me so much grief just by making Christ the center of our home and our lives. So that's kind of what I've always done, and I try to do the same thing with my family and to raise them in that. Matt was a tremendous athlete, and we watched him do all these things, but this story that you're going to hear did dramatically change our lives. I was at Family Fellowship. I had a good job. The people that church loved me, and I loved them. And well, let's be honest. Most of them loved me, and I loved most of them. But I wasn't in a situation that I had to leave. I planned that I was just going to stay there and just retire. Had a good job. I figured I would just see it all out, and it would all work out good. Matt started out as a young athlete, decided when he was 14 he wanted to play, or a little before that he wanted to play the guitar. I gave him an old guitar I had. He started playing it. Before long, he learned on his own how to play the guitar. From the time he was 14 years of age, he stood beside me on the platform and led worship at Family Fellowship. He led worship across town at the Attic, which is our teen church. He ended up teaching junior high class. And he just decided one day that he was going to make a career in ministry his life. Now, that did not hurt my feelings. I probably shouldn't have been as proud of that as I was. But I was very proud of it. And so my wife and I decided we would tear out all the stops, whatever. If my kid wants to be in the ministry, we're going to get it done. We lived in a beautiful home here in Greenville, not fancy-dancy by any stretch, just a normal home, but it was paid for. And that was an amazing thing that we have in our lives to be able to do that. And so we looked at the house next to ours, and it was a rent house. And we approached the people that owned that rental company and said, how much would that house sell for? And they gave me a dollar figure. My wife and I sat down and we said, you know what? We're going to buy that house and then we'll sell it back to Matt so that when he marries his fiance, which by the way is a girl that we love dearly. We never told Matt we loved her because you figured out, right, moms and dads, don't ever tell your kids that you like the person they're dating, because they'll break up with them in a heartbeat. Just don't do it. You know, grandparents, don't tell them. Just no, I hate his guts. They'll stay with him forever. So we decided that this would be great. We loved Lauren to death, and this was going to be perfect. We had an in-ground swimming pool in our backyard surrounded by a privacy fence. I had a plan. As soon as Matt became full-time at our church, I was going to cut a hole in that fence, and put a gate in so we could watch the grandchildren go back and forth and swim in our pool. Now, that's not very spiritual, but that's the truth. That's what we wanted to do. We had our lives planned out. Matt was in his third year of Bible college. I'd already talked to our pastor. He was going to hire Matt upon his graduation because Matt had already led worship for so long at our church. We were going to go from 2 to 3 services because we were filling 2 services at the time. We were going to start a Saturday night service, contemporary, full contemporary. Matt was going to take that, and I would stay in the main 2 services in the blended worship where I was comfortable. I was in a situation where Matt was working for me as an intern, which was fantastic because he had to do everything I said, and he never did that growing up. So I got to get even with all of those things that I mean, it was heaven. It was wonderful. I absolutely loved it. And then about 2 weeks before Christmas in 2007, we had a big Christmas musical at the church. Some of you may have even been in attendance in that. We did it over several nights. And I rented a lot of theatrical lighting equipment to augment what we had at Family Fellowship. And Matt's responsibility was to take that all back to Dallas on that next day. Well, since he was my intern and I said, take that back to Dallas, he had to do it. But he came up to me and he said, I really don't feel like it. My back hurts. So like every good dad, I put my arm around him and said, suck it up. That is exactly what I said. Thank you very much. Because I'm a good dad. I let him have it. Suck it up, son. Come on. This is what I pay you the big bucks for, which is a joke. But so he did. He sucked it up, and he got into the church van, carried the equipment back, and never again was a word said. But all of these plans that I had for my children and my grandchildren and my life and his life and Lauren's life and all of these things that we had, they all came crashing down around us a few days after that event on Christmas Eve, 2009. So the story I'm telling you, maybe you'll understand why after 21 years and in a good job in a place that I didn't need to leave, why when it made more sense to buy a rocking chair, it just seemed to me that it was time to do what it is that we did. I remember walking into the house and telling my wife, I think we need to sell our house and everything we have and buy an RV and drive around the country and tell Matt's story. And my wife said, oh, honey, you are insane. But it wasn't long until she said, I think if that's what you think we should do, I don't think we should miss this opportunity. And that's exactly what we did. Now, if you think that's a poor, pitiful me thing, you're wrong. It's been one of the greatest experiences of my life. I was talking to Jeremy this morning about camping and things. Did you know that in Monument Valley, there's a campground right in the same spot where John Wayne chased the Indians back and forth? I got up every morning and got to look at that. Wow, was that not awesome? And to watch God bless Matt's story over and over, now over 200 times we've told Matt's story. 130,000 miles on our truck, and that doesn't count all the places that we've flown. And the things that God has opened up and done and blessed us, it's not a pity party story. It's been one of the greatest blessings of my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it was a strange thing to do, and that's exactly what we did. But I think in a few short moments, you may understand why we did what we did. It may make perfect sense. So with all of that in mind, Christmas Eve, I had worked literally all night. Now, that's why those of you around here, you understand I was in law enforcement. So if I tell you I worked all night, it's not a big deal. It is fun, however, to go to some churches around the country and say that, and they go, why would a preacher be working all night? So I try to tell them, look, I was involved in law enforcement. We were doing a warrant thing at the time with sex offenders, actually, and I had worked all night trying to give them a place to celebrate Christmas. And so that's what I had done all night, and I came in and I fell down in bed. This was 2 days before Christmas Eve, and my wife elbowed me, and she said, Matt says he can't breathe. I'm taking him to the hospital. And I said, let me know how it all comes out. And I rolled over and went back to sleep. Now, that's not my finest moment, okay? But I'm telling you a story exactly the way it happened, with the good things and the bad things. And that's exactly the truth of what happened. Less than an hour later, my phone rang, and I said, hello, it was my wife. And she said, get down here right now. Something's wrong. I can tell. And she had a tone. You know what I mean by that, guys? Sometimes your wife she's being nice to you. You might question a little bit. But when she has a tone, you normally do what she says and don't say anything. That's what I did. And that threw into motion a series of events that found us in the waiting room at Presbyterian Hospital of Dallas Surgery Suite on Christmas Eve morning, 2009, Matt having been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We sat and talked to the doctor, and the doctor said 2 to 4 hour surgery, we'll let you know. So we said, okay. I'd already told my wife, look, baby, this is Christmas. Now, we got a lot of friends, and I've been in the ministry all my life, and I had lots of friends in law enforcement and in the public safety community. So, but I said, they'll be there for us. But this is Christmas Eve. We'll get through this today. Just watch. We'll be fine. I opened the door to a waiting room that was probably twice the size of this room. And from one side to the other, it was absolutely full. And it was full of people that I knew. Cousins, aunts, uncles, our county judge, my sheriff, close friends, family members. And man, I went from the bottom of the world to the top of the world just like that. My book is called Tears in a Bottle, Lessons from a Broken Heart. And the new version has 32, I believe, lessons that God taught me. They're not lessons I teach you. This is not a treatise on how I handle grief, because I didn't do that good with it, let's be honest. But it's lessons that God taught me, a career pastor, through the loss of our son. And this is one of the first lessons. I learned what it meant to be on a roller coaster, how your emotions can be at the bottom of the world 1 minute, top of the world the next minute, bottom of the world the next minute. It was just crazy. I have never been that way in my life because of just who I am and the way God made me. But I learned that experience, and I learned to appreciate other people who go through that because I saw what it had done in my life and never experienced it before. So we partied. Remember, we had 2 to 4 hours. So man, they passed around the donuts and the little sausage rolls, and it was really awesome. And less than 30 minutes later, the door opened, and it was the doctor. If you've ever been in that situation, if you're expecting 2 to 4 hours and it's 30 minutes, it's never good news. So the roller coaster that I learned to ride went crashing down. Too big, too much, too late, and all I heard in my heart was no hope, no hope, no hope. Now listen, friends, this is what you would call we just opened him up and closed him up because there was nothing they could do. So I walked back in that waiting room on Christmas Eve, and it was completely silent. Nobody said a word. And for the first time, I don't know why you remember these crazy things in grief, but for the first time in my life, I heard on the radio behind me, the little Muzak system, here comes Santa Claus, here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. And I thought, how stupid. Who cares about Santa Claus? My world has just completely fallen apart. And it was very quiet. I don't know that I ever said anything. We never really said why. I couldn't talk. I just cried. And in those moments, somebody said, and I don't know to this day who it was, somebody said, let's pray. Sounds like a good idea to me, right? You know, nothing else to do. So we all gathered hands around this giant room, and nobody said a word. You know why they didn't say a word? Because I'm the preacher. I got this all figured out. I've been a police chaplain for many, many years at this time. I've knocked on well over 100 doors to tell them their loved one had died. Surely I can handle this. I've held the hands of I don't know how many people and their family members when they passed away. I've preached I don't know how many funerals. I got this. Except this time was different. Because this time it was my son. And I said that morning, one of the shortest prayers of my life, and I can tell you guys today, almost word for word, what it was. Ready? Here it is. God, you know exactly what's going on here. And you know exactly how it's all going to come out. The only question is, do I trust you or don't I? And I believe that's important for us to answer that question for ourselves. Because I believe that in all of our lives, at one point or another, God brings us to the place that we have to face them.
Amen.
Do we trust Him? Or don't we? He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide. It trembles at his voice, trembles at his voice. How great is our God! Sing with me, how great is our God! And all will see how great is our God. Stand to your feet with me, please, and sing. Age to age he stands, and time is in his hands. My heart will sing how great is our God. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. One of the first songs that Matt sang, and one that would carry with him through the rest of his life. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. Thank you so much, and please be seated. I will never forget the morning Matt died. It was still Saturday night when Shonda and I went back to the tiny apartment next to the hospital. At this point, Shonda had been by Matt's bedside for days, and I had to catch a little sleep since the next day was Sunday. Shortly after midnight, the phone rang. Come back and hurry. I looked at my watch and I realized it was Sunday morning. Just as quickly, although I cannot explain it, I realized there was no need to hurry. How fitting. Sunday morning, and Matt was at home. You see, after all the heartache, the tears, the pain, the unspeakable pain, I know based on Matt's words, backed up by the way he lived as well as the way he died, that Matt today is in a place where there is no more pain. The earthly body that failed him is now replaced by a glorified body that knows no suffering. Because of the immeasurable sacrifice of Christ on the cross, Matt no longer struggles to breathe. His lungs are full of heaven's breezes. Because there was a time that Matt asked Christ to come into his heart and forgive his sins, he no longer exists in an atmosphere clouded by suffering and questions. Instead, he knows as he is known. Sometimes when I dream, I imagine nearing heaven's gate and finding Matt there to meet me. We share an extended man-to-man bear hug that would be the envy of any reunion. After a few moments and a few hallelujahs, I reach into my shirt pocket and retrieve the bottle full of my tears. Now we all know there is no place for tears in that land. It is then that I imagine approaching my Savior, small brown bottle in hand. I fall on my knees as I near the Holy One into whose presence I am not worthy to enter. I realize that despite my failures, struggles, and questions, I am in the presence of Jesus himself and only by his grace. I raise the bottle, remove the cork, and pour my tears at his feet as an offering. Then and there, I too will be free of the struggles, the doubts, the questions, and the tears. No longer in need of a container to catch any I'll just toss the small, brown, empty bottle into the river of life.
Amen.
In the eye of the storm, you remain in control. And in the middle of the war, you guard my soul. You alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm. When the solid ground is falling out from underneath my feet, between the black skies and my red eyes, I can barely see. When I'm feeling like I've been let down by my friends and my family, I can hear the rain reminding me. In the eye of the storm, you remain in control. And in the middle of the war, you guard my soul. You alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm. When my hopes and dreams are far from me and I'm running out of faith, see the future I picture slowly fades away. When the tears of pain and heartache are pouring down my face, I find my peace in Jesus' name. In the eye of the storm, you reign in control. And in the middle of the war, you guard my soul. You alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm. But they let me go, and I just don't know how I'm gonna make ends meet. I did my best, but now I'm scared to death that we might lose everything. And when the sickness takes my child away, there's nothing I can do. My only hope is to trust you. And I trust you, Lord, in the eye of the storm. You remain in control. And in the middle of the war, you guard my soul. And you alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm. You remain in control. And in the middle of the war, you guard my soul. And you alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm. In the eye of the storm, you remain in control. And in the middle of the war, you guard my soul. And you alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm. So what's our response going to be? Will we worship God in the darkness as well as the light?
Amen.
What about when God takes the best? know some cruel defeat, a prodigal, a broken heart, a dream not meant to be. But when human wisdom fails and there remains no reason why, we must admit life is not fair and our wounded spirit I'll give him glory. When my world comes crashing down, I'll lift him up. When we're faced with true reality, find our deepest need. And when God takes the best, I'll give him praise. It's not just random chance. There is a purpose for the pain in every circumstance. And when God takes the best, I'll give him glory. When my world comes crashing down, I'll lift him up. When we're faced with true reality, we find our deepest need. And when God takes the best, you know he always has a reason. When God takes the best, I'll give him praise. I'll give him my praise. And when God takes the best, I'll give him praise. I'll give him my praise. Praise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemy. Remember what hallelujah means, right? I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. Our weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. And I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated. It was 2.5 years after Matt's memorial service that I had the opportunity to attend a worship conference at Disney World. Disney World, you ask? You bet. I've laughed with many people and asked why I attended the conference at Disney World. The answer is simple. It's because Paul, my pastor and my boss, wouldn't let me attend the conference that was on a cruise ship. At any rate, I had the opportunity to attend this event. Disney has long been known for its magic. From the original pioneers, Walt and Roy, and simple animations that brought imagination to life, to today's state-of-the-art music, fireworks, and special effects productions, the intent seems to be the same: to connect with the inner child, to give life to dreams, and encourage imagination. When I learned that the cost of the conference included an evening at the Magic Kingdom, I was elated. It seemed that on this evening, several A-team Christian artists would perform during extended park hours. During the summer of 2011, we experienced the hottest summer on record, along with the worst drought most old-timers could ever remember. I guess that's why the prevalent afternoon thunderstorms of Central Florida seemed almost an oddity. The worst of those from that week came, you guessed it, on Friday afternoon, while we were riding the bus on the way to the park. When we exited the bus, no one dared make the trek from bus stop to entrance gate. It was a distance of several hundred yards with no cover. The rain came down literally sideways at times, while lightning and thunder were ominous in their tones. Several of us migrated towards the center of the awning covering the bus stop area. Shonda, being her meticulous, phlegmatic self, searched for any remaining dry concrete, took me by the hand, and led me there. Amazing, it seemed to be the only place that the windswept rains could not reach. As I laughed at her simple yet profound wisdom, I noticed we had but one other person in our newly discovered haven. It was a young man who joined us, rather thin and dressed all in black with longer black hair. I remembered him being on the same Disney transport bus from our resort. Most folks on that bus were from our conference, and I correctly assumed he was as well. He was very friendly and immediately struck up a conversation. He asked if I had been attending the conference and specifically what I thought about the previous evening's message. He went on to share how at 28 he had already lived in 5 states. The message had been about the great value of finding somewhere to minister and staying there long term. I told him that he was living proof that I was right in my initial conceptions of the conference attendees. I had been a worship leader 30 years at the time, 2 years longer than he had been alive. We both laughed, but then I realized that it was because of my age that he was talking to me in the first place. I glanced toward Shonda and found in her eyes the permission to go where I felt God was prompting. Going somewhere and staying, I said, yes, there's a lot to be said for that. And in no more than 3 minutes, I shared with him the majority of the story of Matt. I told him that I had been at Family Fellowship then for 17 years and 15 years when my son passed away. I told him that my son had led worship right beside me for years and that he was in his 3rd year of Bible college studying for the ministry. I told him the truth, that I have no idea how I would have ever made it through without my church. Then, as quickly as it started, as it so often does in Central Florida, the rain stopped. I looked at Shonda and asked if she was ready to go in the park. When she said yes, I smiled, but I could see small tears glistening in the corners of her eyes, as I'm sure they were in mine. When I acknowledged her, the young man I had been speaking with reached his hand towards her and said, "I'm sorry, we didn't have a chance to meet. What is your name?" My wife replied, "Shonda." "Nice to meet you," the young man said. "My name is Matt." It seemed as if for that one moment, all of time stood at attention. I grasped my wife's hand firmly as we walked underneath the now still gray sky to the entrance gates of the park. And in those few steps, as I held Shonda's hand tightly in mine, it was as if I could once again feel God's hand tightly holding my other. If a touch of animation can spin life into a wooden puppet, or the touch of a fairy's wand can light a castle,
Why should we be surprised when a touch from the hand of God brings new life into a heart long dead? I have but one lifetime, and that is not nearly enough for this broken heart to fully recover. I have learned this much though. When you lose a child, large parts of your heart just die. It is as if the pain is so desperate, the heart hurts so bad, that it is easier not to feel at all than to feel the pain. I have also learned that just as quickly as life leaves your heart as cold as stone, it can return, much as the rain on a hot Central Florida afternoon. When we learn that no matter how painful, life without rain would leave our hearts and our spirits as dry, cracked, and broken as the ground during that long, hot summer in Texas. The healing hand of God is a power that defies description or explanation. Yet it is as real and as necessary as the air we breathe. I've learned one more thing. I've learned to say thank you, God. Thank you for the rain.
I started out on life's great journey. The sun was warm, the air was clear. If this journey had some darkness, it could never touch me. Traveled on life's highway. I made some friends, I shared some tears. Then moving on, the journey called me. Soon the days turned into Then came the time